the audience felt a lot of information being thrown at them in a very short time. Let's quickly just touch on, Chris, the barn house and the multi-agent, the MASH model in the UK. What exactly is the explanation? What exactly they do?
So the barn house, the child house, is basically a way of bringing together all of those organisations and services that can help a child that's been abused get through the journey from abuse to settlement without having to retell their story numerous times, refocus on lots of different organisations. So you want the child to tell their story once, to receive the medical help they need, the forensic retrieval that's required if it's going to court, the emotional support they need from a medical point of view, the court support if it goes to court, and also the social services intervention if that child needs to be protected from further harm in the home. Prior to us having this type of barn house, child house, that child would have to meet 15 different people, go to 15 different buildings. If you've got the general idea, go to lots of different places. Now they go to one place, the whole thing is coordinated. So it's about coordinating your resource on the ground. Now, Jas has just mentioned MASH, I didn't mention that in my talk. Every local authority, we've got 131 of them in the UK, has a MASH, a multi-agency safeguarding hub. Every child referral that comes in, the hub, which has representatives again from all of those agencies, police, local authority, health, probation, housing. They look at their records and they say, what do we know about this child? What do we know about the family? What do we think the next step should be? Because if a child refers in, if a child is referred in by school because perhaps that child has become lousy, it's got lice and started wetting themselves, which hasn't happened before, that's a sign of neglect. What else do we know about them? And then, so what do we do next? When we know what we know, we can then do what we do next with more sort of authority, with more certainty. So it's that, again, that's about coordinating information prior to action.
Right, so on reflection, is there any way that we could actually use this data?
Yes, well, so that's the thing. So in the barn house and in the MASH, you've got this coordination of activities, but what you haven't got is a coordination and a systematization of the data and information they work upon. So therefore the police person looks at their thing, the social services person looks at their thing, the accounts person looks at their thing, and it's that, that is a million miles better than it was. A million miles better. That's an awful lot better than it was 15 years ago when they wouldn't talk to each other, they saw each other as enemies. They didn't actually like each other. Now at least they like each other, but it's pretty inefficient because you've got to have a meeting about every child, whereas actually you can systematise that data, bring it together, and make it one stream of data with sort of different input points. Then obviously you can move quicker, more authoritative.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Raj brought the whole concept of digitalising artificial intelligence as opposed to not just a digital transformation, but introducing artificial intelligence to transform the whole processes as such. So in terms of how do you think that we can bring artificial intelligence into what you're actually currently using?
Well, I suppose in my little presentation that every child that ends up as an adult where things aren't going right for them has got a series of data lines in their past, police, local authority, health, so on and so forth. And every child that fails to thrive is likely to fail to thrive in a similar way to any other child. And what you've got to do is work out which of these data points, either compounded or added together, are of significance, so you can intervene much earlier, because it is very expensive to lock somebody up in prison or to give them long-term mental health support as an adult. It's much more resource effective and also much kinder to do it when they're 3 or 4 or 5.
Would that be the historical data? I mean, how far back would you actually?
Oh, yeah, well, you want to go historically. You want to go right back to birth.
Right.
You almost want to go back to the mother's pregnancy.
Okay. So, in terms of the data scientist, how would he actually use that historical data as a tool to build the artificial intelligence?
Well, what you would do is you would look at this historical case. I'm doing working backwards, of course, from your point of view, it's going up. Working backwards, you would find each time that child or parents have hit the public authority's radar.
Right.
In what way have they hit the public authority's radar? That is a data point. We code that, and we code each one, and then we code each other one, and then we work out. So artificial intelligence then starts to say, actually, we know that at this point in this child's journey, there's trouble ahead, so we need to intervene now.
Right. Because obviously, using data, it's especially this sensitive data.
Yes.
At this point, I mean, obviously, back in the UK, we have a lot of stringent laws on data and policies. So whether you get over this on this sensitive use of data research.
I think we should ask our lawyer friend on that one.
May I say something?
Yes, we're about to ask you.
Thank you. We're talking about what data we could capture from historical cases that will enable us to build a model that will assess risk for the future. Again, in the UK, we look at a number of things. But let me say this at the outset: we are not very good in the UK. So I'm not telling you what we're doing in the UK is better than what the UAE are doing. Actually, I think you lead us in many respects. But I think internationally, certain bits of data have been proved to be very helpful. So if we were able to get through, look at historical cases, we'd be able to understand demographic data. So the age, gender, race, socioeconomic status, other relevant characteristics of the abuser and the victim. We'd also be able to look at the abuse type and severity. So, look at whether it's physical, sexual, emotional, neglect, what the severity was. We'd have to potentially look at hospital records, police reports, social services, any of the other sources we may have to be able to identify the abuse type and severity. It's also important to look at the family history. Chris mentioned it earlier on. Adverse childhood experience has been proved to be a very key way of being able to assess risk. So you look at the family history, you look at previous incidents of abuse, child welfare involvement, criminal records, mental health records, substance abuse records, any relevant factors that may indicate an increased risk of abuse. We also need to, potentially, we could find social and environmental factors, information about what may have contributed to the abuse in some way, whether there was poverty or social isolation or other environmental factors. Then there's legal outcomes. Some of these cases will have undoubtedly gone through the legal system. We could look again at charges, convictions, sentencing. We would also, hopefully, there would be on the papers psychological and behavioural assessments, both of the victim and the abuser, which can provide some insights into risk factors in the future. And then we could also look at what follow-up. So after interventions have taken place, whether or not there was any continued abuse or whether there were new incidents, etc. Once you've captured, hopefully, all of this information and analysed all of this information, you can, I think, provide you with an AI risk assessment model that will help. I mean, it's never going to be 100% fallible, but help find many more potential victims before they become victims. And that is the key here. This is what we do very badly across the world. We're very good at responding to harm. Well, not good, but we're better at responding to harm than we have ever been. But we are not very good at being able to identify before it comes to harm. And I suspect that through this modelling, through the analytics that we've touched on, through capturing all this data, we'll be in a position for the UAE, for Sharjah to lead the world really in being able to identify risk before it becomes harm.
Fantastic. Anything to add, Chris?
Yeah, the thing about the use of data is that the UK has got sort of 50 years of history where professionals thought data was extremely confidential and they couldn't do anything with it without sort of significant safeguards and permissions from the parents, and, even the data subjects themselves, the children themselves. In fact, that probably was a misinterpretation of the law. The law was very significantly rewritten, changed in 2018, so that if you are, in the UK now, if you are a public official doing a public job in the public interest, protecting children from harm, then there's a duty upon you to share information that can help you lead to that end. However, it takes a long time to turn around an oil tanker, so the children's workforce have been schooled forever in this idea that information is is gold that you must hide away in a safe, and you mustn't get it out. So the law now allows it, but we're struggling at the moment to get all of our children's workforce across the whole piece, whether they're police or social workers or probation or whatever, struggling to actually get them to start sharing the information we need to. But it's a slow journey, but we'll have to get there because we can, because the law allows it.
No, okay, that leads on to, obviously you spoke about data and research. Now, we've got a massive increase in obviously technology and what young people use these days, a lot of social media.
Yes.
How do you find about, a lot of the data sets within social media which lead children to do, follow gang crime research? Where can we intervene in that, and where is the early intervention in that? Because obviously, big tech companies.
May I answer this question?
Yes, please.
When it comes to monitoring or looking for damaging content in social media, it's a multi-step approach. Again, we're learning for all the reasons you know. Now, obviously, there's a responsibility on social media platforms which doesn't necessarily get carried out, and so we've identified a number of things that need to happen. I think the first stage or the first step would be monitoring and detecting. So authorities in the UK, and I suspect yourselves, will use tools and technologies to monitor social media platforms to detect potentially harmful or dangerous content. This can include the use of AI-based tools that detect keywords, images, pattern generated with harmful content. We also hope that there would be an opportunity for people who see this kind of material to be able to whistleblow in effect, or at least alert the authorities if they become aware of it in relation to not necessarily their own child, but what they see. The second step is assessing risk. So once you've detected potentially harmful content, the authorities have to assess the level of risk to the child based on factors such as the nature of the content, the child's age, the child's relationship with the content creator, and the child's history of exposure to harmful content. So a risk assessment. The third thing is about gathering evidence. So authorities collect evidence of the harmful content, including screenshots, metadata, other relevant information that can be used in legal proceedings. The fourth stage is investigation and identification. So authorities investigate the source of the harmful content, which usually can be international. It doesn't have to be from within the UAE, and attempt to identify the content creator and also anybody else who may be involved. And the fifth stage, I would suggest, is taking action. So based on the level of risk and the evidence collected, authorities take appropriate action to protect the child. And this can include removing harmful content, contacting the child and their family to offer support, including advice as well, involving child protection services, or even pursuing legal action against the content creator. So it's important to note that that's potentially the multi-step approach one takes in relation to social media content, but it's an area it's improving day in, day out, and I'm sure there are other areas I haven't touched upon.
Yeah, because Chris, I think we had an earlier conversation where you mentioned about data sets, what the police were actually looking for, where you have a child on social media possibly speaking to an adult.
Yeah, so this is something that we've been doing, when I say we, the authorities widely. It's got to be a man, isn't it? If it's an adult man who's pretending to be a child and he's talking to a child or pretending to be a child, that adult man almost certainly uses the keyboard in a wholly different way from the way which a child uses it. And certainly if you can get behind the initial keyboard strokes, that man is interested in mortgages, trains, stamps, things like that, in a way that a child wouldn't be. So to try and identify from first principles whether or not that person is a man pretending to be a child rather than a child is, you need some pretty powerful, high-powered computing and an algorithm to do that. But I think that would be doable. And the other piece of work that there's a worldwide piece of this is the indecent images. An indecent image is just a stream of data, and so once that's been identified as a stream of data, then a computer can find that stream of data, so nobody ever needs to look at it again. the clever bit is to try and work out what an indecent image that's never been seen before looks like as a stream of data. So this is about using an algorithm. So one indecent image has got this type of stream of data, another indecent image looks like that, and so an algorithm can say, that image that I have detected, I believe is an indecent image because it looks like all the other streams of data I've come across. So then you can actually intervene earlier and take that out of the system. So again, that's a challenge for artificial intelligence as well, which again, I mean, there's work being done on that, and I think that we will get there eventually.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. You've just briefly mentioned HPC. Using all the data streams from content that we see. What's your take? And obviously, we do a lot of work with tech transfer with universities and so forth, for taking that knowledge and then using that knowledge and how we can use HPC with all these data streams. And what's your take on basically the use of HPC?
Well, professionals on the ground are very impatient, aren't they? So you need a computer with a lot of rocket fuel. You do need a high-powered computing in order to make these algorithms actually work in real life. Because if a professional gets speedy results, then that starts to talk to the way they do their job. So some of this stuff is only possible if you've got high-powered computing and a lot of power behind it.
Yeah, I mean, yourself, you've been in the force for 30 plus years. You've done through the child service. I mean, how was your take on technology? How did you yourself get into this technological way of using HPC and moving things forward?
Well, I mean, when I first started, we used to feed our computers with coal and wood and things to get them going. It was so old-fashioned. Policing is a complicated business. I mean, like social services is a complicated business, and you need to find some pretty intelligent and clever answers to this. A complicated business that throws up complex problems, and computing. I mean, it's a form of, it is a form of plumbing, isn't it? You've got to, somebody's got to have the idea and got to launch it. But it's only with high-powered computers can you actually make some progress on this. When I first got into it, we used to have 56 crime analysts in the police force I worked in, and we bought some high-powered software that could synthesize. We actually had 16 different data sets in our own police force that didn't speak to each other. So that's why we needed 56 analysts to go and look at all our 16 data sets. And within about 3 years, we bought this software, and we only had about 2 analysts left because the high-powered computer could actually pick out the information we needed from our 16 data sources. So that's sort of where I got that thing. You can make a real difference with this stuff if you actually know what you're aiming for. But you've got to have a vision. You've got to know what it is you're aiming for. And then people know how to work with tech and program it and make it work for you.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I mean, it didn't help with your bank card games.
Oh yes, yeah. I put my bank card into a bank down in old Dubai yesterday, and it just swallowed it. It gave me no money, gave me no warning, just took it. So there you go. That didn't work.
That's technology.
Fortunately, I've got another one.
Anyway, just wrapping up this session. We have a questions and answers session.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if there's any questions, please feel free. Do you want a mic? Satish? Questions to Naz as well. So, sorry, Naz, you're all over Manchester at the moment. So.
Yeah, I'm hearing every other word, so I didn't hear that, I'm afraid.
Questions and answers.
Say again, sorry?
I mean, when you look on what you are indicating here, right? AI is helping here the humanity because you are addressing children, which should have a better one. Yes, this is the first aspect, right? Yes. The second one is when it comes to financials, because you generate afterwards the cost savings, which you indicated here, right? So what can you do on prevention? Not only on intervention, but on prevention.
Well, the early intervention is prevention, you see. Yeah. That's the point. So, or at least I think that's where we're at on this. That if it does cost £66,000 or 300,000 dirham, whatever it is, to take a child into care, that's a very expensive out turn and very bad for the child, and very bad for the family. if by doing some softer intervention 10 years earlier, at the cost of a few thousand euro or a few whatever, I mean, it isn't really about the money, and I get that, but of course, no country, no organisation's got limitless resources, so if you use them better, that intervention is a form of prevention of much more serious harm. So you provide appropriate support to prevent the serious intervention later on.
And to increase the value of life for the child.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
This is the key message.
And for the family. Yeah. So it's better for the family, it's better for the child, and it's better for society. Right? Yeah.
And also when it comes to the transition, because we are transitioning a process, right?
The what, sorry?
You are transitioning a process.
Yes, yes.
So this is then automated, and normally when you have the right algorithm, you have less failure, less mistake, and you get also more efficient then.
Yeah, so at the moment, decisions about how intervention should be offered in a child's or a family's life are taken by professionals using a combination of professional experience and whatever information they've got available. Somebody is still going to have to make them. You know, you're not going to take a child away or leave a child with a family on the basis of an algorithmic say-so. But what you are going to do is empower the professionals that will make that decision with a better set of information, so that means they can make it earlier, more decisively, and with more confidence. So they will make a better decision earlier.
Right, and also the responses which you get, and you plug them in the system again, you can optimize furthermore, and you can be more effective, right?
Every time we make a good decision, then the algorithm gets better. And indeed, every time we make a bad decision, the algorithm will get better, because it's an iterative process that will feed in.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's the human aspect. AI leads to human improvement, and this is the key message, right?
I think you got 100% behind you on that one.
Yes.
That's a universal, unanimously unanimous.
Yeah, that was all from my side.
Good question.
Yes.
For the, let's say, the sources that you monitor, you mentioned, social media. Do you also look at gaming, to monitor any abuse, any?
Well, certainly gaming is the new, well, there's certainly in the UK, it is a new avenue for abusers. That there's a way into a child's life through the gaming system that they've found more difficult through other social media. So, it is, we know it goes on. I don't know, I'm not involved with the police in terms of doing this monitoring or with social media companies, but certainly that would be something that would be a very rich stream of powerful information that would help better intervention. So yes, that would be a great thing to do. How we move to that point, I don't know really. We need to work with gaming companies and with the authorities.
Exactly, it seems like it's difficult to penetrate that, right? Because you have all these games like Roblox, all our kids play them, and they get exposed to certain things, and I've heard stories around me, it's being.
Yeah. Well, there was a notorious case in the UK about 4 years ago where a child met an adult through a gaming program and ended up getting enticed to that adult's home and ended up being murdered by that adult. So that all went up, and the parents just thought that their son was having fun in his bedroom gaming, with the world of gaming. Who thought there could be any risk in gaming, but certainly that was notorious in the UK, and has sort of enlightened quite a lot of people as to the risks that there are in it, as well as it's a fantastic source of pleasure as well. So one must take a wholly dark view of these things.
Any questions?
On data privacy, because you are connecting the dots, gaming, internet, and that end, right? Is there any exposure that we are getting too transparent? No data privacy anymore on the human aspect?
Oh, well, there is some. Of course, there's data privacy, and those rules are pretty stringent in the UK. It's information that a public authority has. If the person who, if you like, controls that public authority information has a job to do in protecting children, then there isn't any privacy. That information becomes available to the other authorities. Your private information in relation to your gaming system, you would have to sign up, or there would have to be some sanctioned way in which the authorities could look at that. So I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy.
That's the most difficult.
Nobody knows it's easy.
Connect.
I mean, that's probably something that NAS could answer with search.
Yeah, I'm sure Naz can correct that one.
If you can hear that, Naz.
I didn't hear. I missed it. I think the question was around data privacy, wasn't it? And children's privacy, and the law generally. What the UK law is simple. If it's in the public interest, that means in the wider public interest, then you can overrule or in effect undermine individual privacy. So if you are, for example, investigating serious crime, then your own right to privacy is qualified, i.e. they can put bugging devices and surveillance on you, etc. So the same thing applies to the online world. If there is evidence of serious crime, then you can override the individual's privacy in order to be able to identify perpetrators and identify crime. So, at its heart, of course, we're all entitled to privacy, but it can be overridden in the public interest.
I'll just add a point to that. But one thing that we want to try and do, which we're doing in the UK, is work with the university. So the idea is that any case or any law or whatever regulation there is, we're not coming along saying, oh, here's the technology, use it this way. If we work with the local university, you work with the faculty who understands the local law, that's how you localise it, right? So that's one of the things that we'll do as a safeguard here. You're modelling and modelling over again, not only on the data science, but also on the local regulation as well.
May I ask a provocative question?
Sorry?
May I ask a provocative question? Provocative, right? When it comes to the UK, right? Normally, it's helping the kids. It's generating cost savings in a very short time. Why it's not progressing much faster to use it? Because it's such a fantastic program, right?
Well, we believe it will be. It's a matter of getting the test base and moving it forward. I'm sure that you've dealt with public authorities. They are very risk averse, and they are slow to move in terms of adapting and adopting technology, even though it has a benefit sharing. So that's the reason it is. You always have to be in this stuff for the long haul. I mean, I've been involved in several tech projects. When I was in the police, I was very keen on tech projects, and I would want to adopt them, and I would, because I couldn't run everything, so it's reasonably senior, I'd hand it on to somebody, and they would find a way of killing it as soon as they possibly could, because it was just all too, not everybody, but I mean that sometimes happens, that in the public authorities you don't necessarily get sort of a lot out of being an innovator, but you can get into a lot of trouble if you try innovation that doesn't work. So that's the problem. So it's getting over that risk aversion, and I don't think that's unique to the UK. I think you'll find that public authorities the world, and to some extent, of course, they need to be like that, because if you're blown by the wind at every change, you're not much of a public authority, really. You've got no stability. So to some extent, it's sort of hard-boiled or hard-baked into the whole business of being a public authority, that you can't be won over on a whim by somebody that comes along with a good idea, because that would be bad for society. So it's sort of, the upside of having a stable society is that your public authorities are solid and won't move very much, very quickly. But when you've got to try and get them to move.
But that's the good thing again being in Sharjah Research Park, right? Is that Sharjah is not the obvious choice, right, for a lot of AI or tech companies. But obviously, once we saw the facility and the conversations we had with the team here as a test base, and this is probably Chris's first visit to the UAE and Sharjah. The idea is that we can try out ideas. You talk to the right people, you get the end users, and the whole idea of the platform here is you can test anything out. And that's what the HPC will do as well, right? Is there really anybody
other questions?
We've got a question.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, I don't.
We can hear you, particularly.
Fantastic. I think a question on data analysis and capturing this data. So let's say once you've captured this data, how easy would it be for somebody to analyze it and transfer this information to these authorities who require this data? That's the first part.
So I think, this is the domain expertise. So what does each of these data points actually mean, and what is the significance of it? So you need somebody to interpret that for the data scientist, and then that's a matter of codifying it. I think it's a matter of coding the importance of that data point. And then once you've done that once, it becomes iterative, because you've worked out the significance of a father being arrested for violence, the significance of a mental health collapse. Each of those data points have got a different coding, and you can work out, and then how do they compound together to lead to the end output. So I think the first bit is quite hard work, but I think once you've done it, then the iteration becomes simpler each time. That's how I would see it. But I'm not a coder, and I'm not a data analyst. I'm somebody that's sort of knocked around the world of crime and child protection.
But so just to add on to that, yeah. So how the end system, I think that's what you're asking, how the end system would look like.
How easy or difficult is it to, I don't know. I don't know what data, what points are you going to get, but how easy is it going to be? Is it going to be something that these organizations would require specific training, specific to analyze those data? I don't know.
No, so it just depends on what that end user want. As I sort of gave the example earlier, you could have a robot doing dentistry. That was the design. That was the challenge statement was big enough. So it depends on what the end system is. If the end system, let's say you might have a commercial situation where someone's spent £5 million on something, or 5 million dirhams, they can't throw that out, right? So you may have to just integrate into what is already existing, or you make a standalone product. So that would just depend. The algorithm and domain expertise and that modeling bit is the first step.
And just coming back to child safety, once we have this data, we again have the same problem, right? Because we have 5 different teams or organizations who weren't taking responsibility because there was data, and that data is being transferred to the 5 different organizations in this child safety discussion. Now, who takes responsibility and says, I've got this data, now I will intervene and I will step in and solve this problem out?
Well, so in the UK,
in
the UK, then decisions around a child's safety are taken by the local authority, social services department, and at the moment they are, and they would be under this algorithmic approach, they are supported by the other agencies who provide them with information and expertise. What we're trying to do is codify that information expertise so that the decision can come earlier. I mean, we use this sort of process, but in a very paper-based way, in a number of ways in the UK. So when somebody's released from prison, they're given a risk score, which is basically an algorithmic risk score based upon their past, their age, their marital status, and you bring a whole load of this stuff together, and effectively they get given a score. That's basically an algorithmic approach. And the prison authorities say this, because they're mostly men, right? This man is at high risk of committing further offences, and there's a very high risk that he's going to commit a lot of harm on being released from prison. And therefore, ... you need to put this package now, that score doesn't mean to say he's definitely going to do it, or he's definitely not going to do it, or simply you can release somebody who gets a low score. But what it does, it provides the professionals with some basis upon which they're going to act. Now that's all done on paper. What this would be a computerized version of that, giving the professionals a much better window into what is likely to happen, and therefore how they ought to respond.
Can I ask one more question?
Sorry?
Can I ask one last question? Just about the legal aspect of this. Now, once we have all the data, we know that this family or this child is under the risk of child abuse. There is no crime that's happened. How do you legally intervene at this situation? How do you prevent it? Because there is no crime, right? There is no data, there is no evidence. What happens at this stage?
I mean, obviously, great question, as people say when they want to think. So again, it's empowering the decision maker earlier in the process to make a better and more accurate decision. So you remember the pyramids, the child in need piece, which is most children that are having some intervention in their lives in the UK, they are under the child in need plan. That's all voluntary anyway, so parents don't need to partake in that if they don't want to. The child protection plan is statutory. They have to do what the authorities say they need to do because there's an assessment that this child is at risk and being looked after, being taken away from your parents. Again, that's a legal thing. It's not a crime. It's about the protection of the child. So what we want to do is to, if you like, to really flatten that pyramid so that far more children are dealt with at a much lower level. And if you want to intervene and you say to the family, we need to do this because we've got some concerns, and they say, actually we don't want to, you then must consider moving on to the statutory phase where you've got to, or you keep a watch on them, and then you make sure that the next time they come to notice, you give that additional weight.
Yeah. So, hi, Naz, did you catch that question? Do you want to add to that? He's on mute. Naz?
No, sorry, I did listen to most of that, and I agree with Chris actually. There's nothing I would add to that.
So I can add, the good initiative that UAE have is the Ministry of AI, and we have met with them as well. So that's a very good point in terms of how do you intervene or predict, right? So you're basically going to be saying to somebody, here's a prediction time, and this algorithm is saying it, there's not a person behind it, right? I mean, they've had cases in the US now where algorithms, I think, have designed, there's filed patents and things like that as well. I personally think, yes, eventually an algorithm will be a majority of the proof in some instances, and how the law will change that. I think the Ministry of AI is something that is a body that we will interact with more, and obviously hopefully work with the university on some of the law sides as well.
And this does have some history in the UK, so it's a bit of a contested topic in terms of child protection and child safeguarding, but there have been a number of academics for years, this is without computing, working on an actuarial approach to child protection. So basically using a paper-based version, so there's these, they wouldn't call them data points, there's these events that have happened in this child's life, we can give each one a score, and if they reach the score 46, as soon as they reach 46, we know that there's issues we need to move in. And there's quite a strong sort of academic thread that says you've got to somebody has to make the decision based on something. Are you just going to let them do it on gut feel, or do you actually want them to be equipped with the very best sort of source of information, best analysed information they've got, so that it improves their decision making? I don't think I would want to be involved in a system where the algorithm says this or the algorithm says that, and that's law. You want the algorithm to empower the professionals to make good decisions.
I mean, I agree with that entirely. It doesn't replace the human being and the human judgment. It just provides you with more information to enable you to make a better informed judgment.
Any other questions? I think that's about it, Chris, I think.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you everybody for attending, and we're available. You've seen the emails, and we're obviously going to be around for another 30, 40, 50 minutes, so do feel free to approach us. Thank you. More coffee.
There's more coffee.
Thank you.